for this great occasion of celebrating science in the Italian Parliament. So this is really an important moment, and good afternoon and welcome to all of you. It is really an honor for me as a senator for life and as a scientist. I am a neurobiologist to host the Primo Levi Award 2025 of the Italian and German Chemical Societies and the International Center for Primo Levi Studies. And this award, now in its fourth edition, celebrates Primo Levi's extraordinary scientific and humanitarian legacy. And his work and his view and vision really remind us of the essential link between research and civic responsibility. And as Professor Jean-Marie Lehn, today's award recipient and Nobel laureate, has said, science is a vector of peace, development and progress, and it should be shared universally. And science, as we all know, begins really with the universal spark of curiosity and thrives when we work together across borders and disciplines. Especially within Europe, we can be very strong in Europe if we go united. And this is really something that Europe has uniquely enabled. So chemistry, which is the field of Professor Lehn, is sometimes misunderstood, and your field is sometimes misunderstood, yet it is really the foundation of nature itself. And his pioneering work in supramolecular chemistry and his commitment to European cooperation really exemplify the social mission of science. So when and where science is shared, societies grow stronger and together, and citizens are empowered. And we must never forget the social and ethical dimension of our work as researchers. And I'm really happy to host all of you here, and please, thanks a lot.
My name is Gianluca Farinola. I'm the president of the Italian Chemical Society. Onorevole senatrice a vita, professoressa Elena Cattaneo, our distinguished laureate, Professor Jean-Marie Lehn, sehr geehrte Frau Präsidentin der GDCH, Frau Professorin Stefanie Denen, illustre Presidente del Centro Internazionale di Studio Primo Levi, Professor Fabio Levi, illustre Professor Renzo Levi, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen der GDCA, care e cari partecipanti della SCI, signore e signori, it's a great pleasure and honor for me, on behalf of the Società Chimica Italiana, to welcome you all here in Roma, in the solemn setting of Palazzo Giustiniani, at the Senate of the Italian Republic. We are gathered to celebrate the fourth edition of the Primo Levi Award, the joint prize of the Gesellschaft Deutscher Chemiker, la Società Chimica Italiana, and the Centro Internazionale di Studi Primo Levi. I'm deeply grateful to Professor Elena Cattaneo, senatrice a vita of the Italian Republic, for taking the initiative to host this event in such a prestigious venue, at the very heart of Italy's democracy institution. This setting resonates perfectly with the solemnity and the meaning of the award that we are celebrating today. This award actually was conceived first by Dr. Peter Golitz, and then set up in the first edition by Professor Franco De Angelis and Professor Wolfram Koch. It is named after Primo Levi, who was both a victim and a survivor of Auschwitz, an internationally renowned writer, a chemist and a fine intellectual. He is one of the foremost voices in contemporary literature and among the brightest minds of our era. Levy's writings depict some of the most dramatic pages in our recent history with an insightfulness that comes both from his human experience and from his mindset as a chemist. The Primo Levi Award recognizes the outstanding achievements of chemists and of scientists working in closely related disciplines who have distinguished themselves not only through excellence as researchers, but also through their service to humankind and their commitment to upholding human rights. The award honors exceptional individuals who help to raise awareness of the crucial role of chemistry in fostering a just, inclusive, and sustainable global society. The awardees fully embody these values: Professor Roald Hoffmann, Professor Vincenzo Balzani, Professor Henning Opf in previous editions, and now Professor Jean-Marie Lehn, Nobel laureate in chemistry in 1987, whom we have the privilege of celebrating today. The Primo Levi Award highlights one of the most significant and profound dimensions of what it means to be a scientific society and a chemical society today. It recalls the values on which the mission of Società Chimica Italiana is rooted and which we share with our sister society, the Gesellschaft Deutscher Chemiker. We, as scientific societies, exist to provide a space in which it is possible to develop the languages needed to organize complexity, to communicate it and to govern it. We are the ground on which bridges are built between our extraordinarily powerful science and its enormous technological and industrial development. Our mission, our duty, the very reason for our existence, lies in reflecting within our communities and bringing outwards, with competence and responsibility, the voice of chemistry in Italy, in Germany, in Europe, and in the world. Its research, its technical contribution to progress, its educational values, and its ethical and deontological principles. We share the belief that our responsibilities as chemists encompass not only the advancement of science, the provision of high-quality education, the establishment of sustainable production practices, and the pursuit of excellence in our diverse professional roles. Our responsibilities also include ensuring that our voices are present in the realm of politics, economics, where decisions are made that can profoundly affect the progress and the well-being of people in our countries, in Europe and in the world at large. In this endeavor, our two societies also share a strong commitment to uplifting our common European identity. This is evident in our engagement with EUCHEMS, which is today prominently represented here by its president, Professor Angela Agostiano, and by its elect president, Professor Wolfram Koch. And in our joint partnership in publishing under the common umbrella of Chemistry Europe, which brings together 16 societies from 15 European countries. All our activities are devoted to the dissemination of scientific knowledge and culture, ultimately striving for the well-being and widespread progress of societies and humankind. We as chemists know that transformation and change over time govern matter, and history as well. Yet, following the legacy of Primo Levi, we must also be able to preserve the memory of events and to articulate the broader message of science in support of the principle of ethics, peace, respect, and tolerance. In our present geopolitical situation and historical context, the significance of this award is way all the more profound. Today, we celebrate the prestigious laureate of 2025 Primo Levi Award, Professor Jean-Marie Lehn. And with him, we celebrate the role of chemistry in building a better world, not only through scientific and technological progress, but also through the ethical values intrinsic to our science. The Società Chimica Italiana, warmly welcomes all of you. And now it's my pleasure to pass the stage to Professor Stefanie Dehnen, the President of the German Chemical Society, and afterward to Professor Fabio Levi, President of the Primo Levi International Study Center.
Thank you very much. Cara senatrice a vita, professoressa Elena Cattaneo, caro professore Renzo Levi, figlio di Primo Levi e membro del Centro Internazionale di Studi Primo Levi, caro professore Fabio Levi, presidente del Centro Internazionale di Studi Primo Levi, caro professore Gianluca Farinola, presidente della Società Chimica Italiana, cara professoressa Angela Costiano, President of the European Chemical Society, dear Professor Wolfram Koch, President-elect of the European Chemical Society, dear colleagues, dear distinguished guests, dear Professor Jean-Marie Lehn. It is my great honor to welcome you all to this significant ceremony on behalf of the German Chemical Society, GDCH. I would also like to extend my greetings to Ms. Sophia von Hatzfeld from the Cultural Office of the German Embassy, who can unfortunately not be with us today. I'm truly delighted to be here with you in this impressive venue to bestow an important prize upon a remarkable personality. This ceremony represents not merely an award presentation, but a celebration of values that transcend science and touch the very core of our humanity. The prize we award today bears the name of Primo Levi, a name that carries profound weight and meaning, particularly in Germany. We've already heard a bit about Primo Levi's life, and we are going to hear more about that, so I will not repeat it here, but I'd like to emphasize again that his courage, being aware of the fact that his commitment against fascism bears a high risk, extended far beyond academic pursuit, which should be an example for all of us. For us Germans, preserving Primo Levi's legacy carries special responsibility and significance. His testimony reminds us not only of the darkest chapter in our history, but also of the imperative to remain vigilant guardians of human dignity and democratic values. His life exemplifies how science and moral responsibility are inseparably intertwined. We gather here today in challenging times. Wars rage on multiple continents, democratic institutions face threats from within and without, global challenges like climate change and pandemics demand urgent action. Economic uncertainties make life increasingly difficult for many people around the world. The temptation to retreat into our private spheres, to look away and rather focus solely on our own concerns has perhaps never been stronger. Yet it is precisely in such times that we must resist this temptation. We must take a stand, show moral courage, and orient ourselves by the examples of those who came before us. Primo Levi was such an example, a man who, despite experiencing unimaginable suffering through persecution, imprisonment, and forced labor, never lost his humanity. Even more remarkably, he transformed his suffering into a mission to educate future generations about the horrors of the Holocaust, to ensure that never again would not remain an empty phrase but a living commitment. As a chemist, Primo Levi understood the importance of precise observations and accurate reporting. As a witness, he applied the same principles to documenting human experience. He showed us that science without ethics is dangerous, but also that ethics without knowledge is powerless. In our current era of misinformation, polarization, and the manipulation of truth, this insistence on bearing honest witness is more vital than ever. Primo Levi reminds us that remaining human in unhuman times is both our greatest challenge and our most essential duty. He teaches us that knowledge, whether scientific or historical, carries with it the responsibility to act, to speak out, and to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, we, the German Chemical Society, proudly affirm our commitment to democracy, freedom of expression, and scientific integrity. For us, Primo Levi represents both an inspiration and a warning. An inspiration to pursue science in service of humanity, and a warning of what can happen when we abandon our moral compass. His legacy challenges us to recognize that chemistry, like all sciences, does not exist in a vacuum. It is practiced by human beings, for human beings, and must therefore be guided by human values. In a world facing many challenges requiring scientific solutions, we must remember that technical knowledge alone is insufficient. We need wisdom, compassion, and moral courage, qualities that Primo Levi embodied throughout his life. We are deeply honored and proud to award this prize together with our cherished colleagues from the Società Chimica Italiana and the Centro Internazionale di Studi Primo Levi. This collaboration itself embodies the spirit of international cooperation and shared values that Primo Levi championed. It represents a bridge between nations, one divided by war, now united in the pursuit of scientific excellence and human dignity. And we honor Professor Jean-Marie Lehn today. We celebrate both his outstanding scientific achievement and the continuation of a tradition that Primo Levi exemplified, the union of intellectual rigor with moral purpose, of scientific excellence with human compassion. May this prize serve as a beacon, reminding us all of our responsibility to use our knowledge and skills in service of humanity, to speak truth in the face of falsehood, and to stand firm in defense of human dignity, especially when it is most under threat. Thank you all for being here today to share this meaningful occasion. Thank you very much.
I am deeply honored to take part in today's celebration for the presentation of the Primo Levi Award to Professor Jean-Marie Lehn. First of all, I am honored because of the great personality of the award winner. Then, as president of the International Primo Levi Studies Center, I see that occasion as an opportunity to go forward in our studies and our thinking in order to strengthen the structures of the initiative that we are all contributing to with renewed conviction. Together with our center, the German and the Italian chemical societies cooperate periodically and in identifying the best candidate on whom to confer a public recognition in the name of Primo Levi. At the same time, in my opinion, the Primo Levi Center must get to know how to offer a richer and richer contribution to the ways through which Levi, in his life and his works, tried to weave scientific knowledge and practice in with a broader vision of the lives of human beings. Levi had an extremely varied relationship with science and particularly with chemistry. According to a recent text by the English scholar Robert Gordon, a professor at the University of Cambridge, there are at least 5 figures of persons of science that circulate in Levi's literature. Here, we can point out books where Levi deals with this topic more specifically, such as the periodic table, other people's trades, and the search for roots. We can also include his collection of science fiction and fantasy biology, which contain many explicit critical allusions and passages of scathing irony. Hence, Gordon first rights of Levi as a rationalist who weighs and divides, measures and judges on the basis of certain proofs, and strives to give answers to the questions why. He writes secondly of Levi, the naturalist and anthropologist, who is curious by definition, for whom the aim of science is not so much the deduction of hypotheses and models as much as the observation of phenomena and that are natural, be they mineral, vegetable, or animal of any kind, including human. Third, there is also Levi, the technician, the haunter of laboratories, an industrial chemist who worked to solve everyday scientific problems. Fourth, there is the figure of the managerial bureaucratic scientist, Levi as a company man of the 1960s and 1970s who had already left the laboratory. Finally, there is a fifth figure that is very present as much in Levi's life and in his works, tied in with an idea of science rooted in wonder and pervaded with the romantic scientist spirit of adventure and desire for discovery. According to Gordon, this figure of wonder is the key for a more complete interpretation of the hybrid nature of Levi, the writer, scientist, witness. At this point, wonder seems to impose itself as the bridge between science and literature. There is not enough time now to go deeper into this topic, but it is enough to say that these figures stand out even more, and even more so the figure of wonder, if we look at them in the light of the perversion of science that the Nazis committed and that Primo Levi already experienced in person in the years of his education during fascism and later in the concentration camp. We should focus on this further in order to outline the connections between the manipulation of knowledge that Levi clearly perceived when he was a young student at the Liceo d'Azeglio in Turin on the one hand, and the horrors of Auschwitz on the other. Here I am referring to the method of technological extermination, to the so-called medical experiments inflicted to the deportees, and to the less obvious forms of the subjugation of science to power during the years of Hitler and other totalitarian systems. Rather, it is precisely in this environment that the ambiguity of human behavior is most unsettling and hardest to uncover. Therefore, this ambiguity consists in science in its development in, let us say, normal times, together with science seen and represented in the upside-down mirror of the concentration camp. At this point, a primary line of research in Levi's works should be able to lead us to draw a border between the varying degrees of manipulation and perversion of scientific knowledge on all occasions, harbingers of grave risks for the present and the future, and their use aimed instead at the improvement of the conditions of human beings and the environment of their lives. There is then a second line of our research that is no less important. Science calls for a practical commitment on the part of those who wish to learn it, as well as a specific educational effort. It calls for the acquisition of specialistic skills that are often distant from the experience of most people. As Levy seems to suggest, science in its practice and in its concrete after effects does not go on in a sphere that is completely separate. Its border with life has never been very clear. Like all of us, a scientist is a woman or man who has never stopped being her or himself as much in daily life as in scientific work. This is the reason why the ethical dimension is intrinsically rooted in the concrete experience of science and of those that practice it, and why an award like ours is so important.
I would like now invite Professor Angela Agostiano, the President of EUCHEMS, to address some welcome words to the participants.
Okay. Distinguished colleagues and dear guests, it is obviously for me a great honor to be part of this celebration for the Primo Levi Award. Being here is both a privilege, because it's a privilege to stay here with such an important colleagues, a Nobel laureate, a member of the Senate of the Italian Republic, but it's also an emotional moment, because remind me that I was present and at the first Primo Levi Award held in Berlin, and then I participate as a president of the Italian the Società Chimica Italiana to the celebration that was held in Rome, in which was awarded Professor Balzani, that for Italian chemists, of course, is a great master and teacher for all of us. As a president of EUCHEMS, it's really a privilege to be here, because the idea that is underlined by this kind of award, that is that not in science, it's really relevant, the excellence of science, but it's also important as this excellence is always conjugate with the commitment with the civil society. And the idea that we want to award a member of our scientific community that also has done something for the humanity. These are principles, the principle that EUCHEMS, of course, shares completely, just because it's EUCHEMS. It's an organization of almost 50 societies from 35 countries in Europe. So the principle of a science that is linked, deeply linked to the needs of the society is what guide our action every day. And this award is a ceremony that is very special because in somehow is something that reminds us our past, but in the same times remind us that we have to have a faith, to be faithful in the future, to dream about the future, because chemistry is a science that not only has in his hand, or in her hand, the key for reading the nature and also to modify the society, but is also the science of complexity. So it's the science linked to inclusion, the idea of peace, inclusion, cohabitation of several different people and several different ideas is what moves the action of EUCAMS. So really, the motivation why EUCAMS is supporting this award is not only because it's an award of two of our more distinguished societies, but there are also motivations that are strictly linked to what EUCAMS is doing in Europe. That is representing the connection between chemistry and society, the defense of scientific integrity and responsibility, the promotion of role models who combines research with ethical commitment and attention to global needs, and also the belief that chemistry is a universal language. And this is what made chemistry something that represents cooperation, and so is something that is linked to our memory, but it's also a hope for the future. And Professor Le, in the behalf of EUCAMS, I would like really to share with you all congratulations from all the members of EUCAMS. You are for us really a guide, because you represent what EUCAMS wants to represent for the European community. The combination of science with cooperation without border, science without border. And from this point of view, just your presence is something that is linked to the idea of sharing knowledge and cooperation. And finally, I would like to thank the Società Chimica Italiana, the General Society of Chemistry, and the Centro Primo Levi for organizing this extraordinary event and for preserving the memory and the vision of Primo Levi, a legacy that continues to guide and inspire us in this year, in 2025, and I hope beyond this year. Yes. Welcome here, and thank you very much.
Now, following the tradition of the ceremony of Primo Levi Awards, we are going to read the motivation of the award in Italian, in English, and in German. Then Professor Stefani Denen will pronounce the laudatio, and we will hand over the diploma to Professor Len. He'll give then his lecture, and finally we will give him a present which symbolizes this celebration. Il professor Jean-Marie Len è insignito del premio Primo Levi 2025 in riconoscimento del suo profondo contributo come sostenitore della natura transnazionale della scienza, dedicata ad unire le persone attraverso l'eccellenza scientifica, la cooperazione internazionale, e l'avanzamento etico della conoscenza. La sua dedizione è stata fondamentale nel promuovere la cooperazione scientifica paneuropea all'interno della comunità chimica. Il professor Lenn ha svolto un ruolo eccezionale nel superare le divisioni storiche e politiche, promuovendo così uno spirito coeso e unificato in tutto il continente.
Professor Jean-Marie Lehn wird mit dem Primo-Levi-Preis 2025 ausgezeichnet in Würdigung seines tiefgreifenden Beitrags als Fürsprecher der transnationalen Natur der Wissenschaft, die darauf abzielt, Menschen durch wissenschaftliche Exzellenz, internationale Zusammenarbeit und die ethische Weiterentwicklung des Wissens zu vereinen. Sein Engagement war maßgeblich für die Förderung der gesamteuropäischen wissenschaftlichen Kooperation innerhalb der Chemie-Community. Professor Lehn spielt eine herausragende Rolle bei der Überwindung historischer und politischer Spaltungen und förderte somit einen geschlossenen und geeinten Geist auf dem gesamten Kontinent. Professor Jean-Marie Lehn is honored with the Primo Levi Award 2025 in recognition of his profound contribution as an advocate of the transnational nature of science dedicated to uniting people through scientific excellence, international cooperation, and the ethical advancement of knowledge. His dedication has been instrumental in advancing pan-European scientific cooperation within the chemical community. Professor Lehn played an outstanding role in overcoming historical and political divisions, thereby fostering a cohesive and unified spirit across the continent. So, the Primo Levi Award 2025 to Professor Jean-Marie Lehn, Nobel Laureate, in recognition of his profound contributions as an advocate of the transnational nature of science, dedicated to uniting people through scientific excellence, international cooperation, and the ethical advancement of knowledge. His dedication has been instrumental in advancing pan-European scientific cooperation within the chemistry community. Jean-Marie Lehn played an outstanding role in overcoming historical and political divisions, thereby fostering a cohesive and unified spirit across the continent. My congratulations.
Thank you very much. Maybe I'll give my talk first.
No, she had to
Okay,
interrogation,
yeah, okay.
then, yeah. So we go downstairs for a picture.
Dear colleagues, dear distinguished guests, dear Jean-Marie Lehn, it is both a profound honor and a personal joy to deliver this laudation for Professor Jean-Marie Lehn, recipient of the Primo Levi Award 2025. As the president of the German Chemical Society, I can think of no one more deserving of this prestigious recognition. As we have already heard, the Primo Levi Award recognizes outstanding achievements of chemists and scientists from neighboring fields in the service of humanity, in upholding human rights, and for advancing the dialogue between chemistry and society. To illustrate how much Jean-Marie Lehn is deserving this award, let us take a deeper look at our awardee's life and achievements. Jean-Marie Lehn is a European in the deepest sense. Born in Rossheim in Alsace in 1939 and raised with German as a second language as a cultural bonus, but also as the compulsory first language of his childhood schooling, he has internalized the conclusion that Europe has no other choice but becoming a unified entity. For us as scientists, this may sound like a trivial piece of wisdom nowadays, but as we all know, other ideas are also emerging at present. As far as Jean-Marie Lehn is concerned, he has lived a life that embodies the very essence of the European scientific cooperation. His geographical and intellectual journey, from living in a historically contested region to becoming a global scientific leader, mirrors the transformation of European science from division to unity. Very logically, he was therefore a motor of the foundation of a European Journal of Chemistry, the original name, as he recognized that the many national chemistry journals in Europe could not compete with the top American ones. Moreover, Jean-Marie Lehn is a master in looking beyond the boundaries of his field. Intellectual pursuits and culture to him serve only one, rather philosophical purpose, to merge into a single unit. Jean-Marie Lehn is an enthusiastic and talented player of the organ and the piano. And indeed, Jean-Marie also stated once that he considers chemical compositions a form of music. As a great fan of the oeuvre of Wagner and Strauss, this also includes the awareness of both consonances and dissonances. For him, cluster chords and free modulation between chromatically altered tonalities belong both to music and chemistry and life. Those who know Jean-Marie Lehn well are aware of his unlimited creativity, his sharp mind, and tireless productivity. It came to my knowledge that about 30 years ago, he even developed a board game, Moleco, to make the chemistry of molecules accessible to a wider audience in a playful way. And his outreach to the public was additionally honored in an Alsatian version of a popular picture book, Tintin, in German Tim und Struppi, in which Jean-Marie Lehn appears in his role as a professor, clearly demonstrating that he also reached a segment of the population beyond the scientific community. Within the scientific world, Jean-Marie Lehn's groundbreaking research he performed mainly in Strasbourg, but also in Harvard and Paris, has opened many avenues, from drug design to material science, from nanotechnology to sustainable development. And nanotechnology is our personal link, as Jean-Marie Lehn has been one of the founding fathers of my own institute, the Institute of Nanotechnology at Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. His work has shown us that chemistry is indeed the central science, the problem solver for humanity's greatest challenges. He transformed chemistry from the art of making bonds towards self-organization and adaptation. This way, he initialized an entirely new way of thinking about the interaction of atoms in the fashion of a supramolecular chemistry, the chemistry beyond the molecule. Together with Donald Crum and Charles Peterson, Jean-Marie Lehn revolutionized our outstanding understanding of molecular recognition. This allowed him to earn the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1987 as the highlight of the innumerable recognitions of his scientific merits, which also included the German-French Gay-Lussac Humboldt Award, the Lavoisier Medal, the Medal of the Société Française de Chimie, the Ceranès Gold Medal, the Gold Medal of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, the Davy Medal of the Royal Society, and more than 20 honorary doctorates, to name but a few. We like to emphasize that Jean-Marie Lehn has been not just a member of the German Chemical Society, GTCH, for many years, but a true pillar of our community. His unwavering commitment to our chemical society has been exemplified through countless contributions, most notably as one of the first supporters of our meanwhile new division of supramolecular chemistry. He recognized early on that this emerging field needs a home, a community, and masters, and he gave it all three. However, what truly sets Jean-Marie apart and underscores his worthiness of the Primo Levi Prize is his personal qualities, in particular his extraordinary openness and generosity, and his deep belief that science transcends borders, politics, and divisions. In the post-Cold War era, when Europe was still healing from decades of separation, Jean-Marie became a bridge builder. Through his leadership as the president of the International Organization for Chemical Sciences and Development from 1992 to 2021, hence for 29 years, he has extended the vision globally, particularly to developing nations. His credo, I'm quoting, "Science is a vector of peace, development, and progress. It is universal. It should be shared universally," resonates deeply with Primo Levi's philosophy that scientific facts and human values are inextricably linked. As I already alluded to, his vision gave birth to Chemistry Europe and its flagship publication, Chemistry, a European Journal, in 1995. Without his initiative and diplomatic skills, this joint European publishing endeavor might have remained just a dream. And since 2017, Jean-Marie Lehn has served as the patron of the Prix Faucheur Jean-Marie Lehn, which is awarded every year by the French Embassy in Berlin and the Franco-German University to a Franco-German tandem for outstanding cooperation in the fields of chemistry, health, and of pharmacology. Jean-Marie Lehn has exemplified that excellence in science goes hand in hand with ethical responsibilities. He has demonstrated that groundbreaking research can and should coexist with human compassion, and that the pursuit of knowledge must always serve humanity. His legacy is not just in the molecules and supramolecular assemblies he has designed and the concepts he has introduced, but in the countless scientists he has inspired and the collaborative spirit he has fostered across our continent and beyond. The German Chemical Society is proud to join our colleagues from the Società Chimica Italiana and the Centro Internazionale di Studi Primo Levi in honoring Jean-Marie Lehn today. The awarding of the Karl Ziegler Prize by the GDCH in 1989 and the Giulio Natta Gold Medal by the SCI in 2023 are a testament to the high regard in which our societies hold today's awardees' achievements. Today's award crowns a lifetime dedicated to science as a force for unity and progress. Dear Jean-Marie Lehn, you have taught us that chemistry is not just about molecules, it's about connections. What holds for bonds between atoms or interactions between molecules also applies to bonds between people, disciplines, and nations. You have shown us that science at its best is music and a universal language that speaks to our common humanity. On behalf of the German Chemical Society and the entire chemical community, I congratulate you on this well-deserved honor. May your example continue to inspire generations of scientists to see beyond the laboratory bench to the broader horizon of human progress and international cooperation. Thank you, Jean-Marie Lehn, for being not just a brilliant scientist, but a true ambassador for science and humanity. Congratulations.
First of all, I heard my name much too much. But thank you very much for that. Now, wait a minute, where is the machine? Oh, here it is. All right, very nice meeting. Very friendly, very warm. And I would like to thank all those who have contributed to this award for me. I want to cite somebody else. He's sitting there, Peter Görlitz, because he was very operational in starting these journals which go across countries. You know, for me, that's the Italian flag. That's my flag. I have always been very much European because these different cultures, these different countries, these different languages. But it's a battle of every day in Europe. I didn't want to say that, what I'm starting now with, but I would like to insist on it. And in fact, it happens that about 1 week ago, there was a new initiative which started in Strasbourg, which is called Europa Nova, trying to get a new impulse into things. Whether it will work out or not, I don't know. They asked me to participate. I usually have too many things to do already, but this is the thing I participate in. So just for you, a conclave in this famous eternal city, hang on to Europe. We are not alone in the world. We don't want to compete. We don't want to be bad girls, bad boys. But we have to stick together if we want really to continue to make this impact on the world. So, I have a number of people to thank, but I have already done some. And the other things which come later in the course of my presentation. First of all, you see here Primo Levi. For me, it is you could say another prize. No, it's not the case. Because Primo Levi was a chemist, okay. I have nothing against chemistry, quite to the contrary. Number two, he was also a writer, an artist, and art is one of the things which mankind has to really support. Be it music, be it painting. I just saw the Caravaggio there's a famous Caravaggio in the Saint Louis Church, the French, what is called also the French Church. A very nice Caravaggio, I must say. Others are nice too, but that one is especially nice. And finally, Primo Levi was what his people call a Mensch. Not just a chemist, not just an artist, a writer, but a human being. That's enough. That's what we should be. And as I said, with Peter Göditz in the Bierkeller in Munich, with the help of the German Chemical Society, we started this strange thing, which was to try to bring people together in publication and so on. Okay, this morning I was giving a lecture at La Sapienza. It was a complicated lecture because I didn't know there would be a lot of students, but there were many students, and so I have been very careful now not to give overtime because I was very much overtime this morning. Now, wait a minute. That's it. Now, there is somebody else I would like to mention. Rita Levi-Montalcini. She had nothing to do with Primo Levi, as far as you know, unless, of course, when the name is the same, there must be some kind of relationship. She was like Professor Caetano. She was also, she got a Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for neurobiology. So there's some strength. The ladies are very strong here. Huh? That's good. And she was also senator for life. But the title of my lecture is Towards Complex Matter, would have guessed that, and then had something to do with the periodic system. I will try not to get carried away, because otherwise you finish very late, but I will see. Okay, here is where we start. And we have to think deeply about that. There was the Big Bang, and now it has been almost experimentally established that it was followed by a cosmic inflation. In 10 to the minus 36 seconds something, the universe increased in size by 10 to the 78. You cannot imagine that. But that is what the measurements of the last thing, the Wilkinson, the Wilkinson probe of asymmetry of the background radiation in the universe has brought experimental support to that. So after that, then, once this started, physics came up. And this was the time of physics. No chemistry, no biology, no nothing like that. Chemistry started a bit later when it was cool enough to make atoms, molecules. Molecules got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when it was At some stage, they separated, they made sort of primitive compartments, and chemistry had started and then led to more complicated assemblies. And life on Earth started around that time. As we know, that's the age of biology. So from physics to chemistry to biology, matter had become more complex. But now, there is even a much more complex period when thinking appeared. Without thinking, we would not be here. We would be running around in the fields and so on. It's nice, why not? It's nice to be in a meadow, eating grass, producing milk. But okay, we have something else. And without that, we wouldn't be here. And it's also something which, for me, is very difficult to understand, but it's a fact. How can this entity out there think back on where it comes from? Thinking back of your origin, that is something very difficult to understand that it can happen. And this is thanks to science. And one of famous person among these representatives of what we call human race, the human society, is Primo Levi. And he very well represents the ideal of what should be a human being. So the big question then we have to raise as scientists, I think you would agree that it is one big question. How does matter become complex? Up to us, and maybe further on other planets, in other galaxies, and so on. How can you go from an elementary particle to a thinking organism? And are there higher forms, perhaps, even of complex matter? We can represent that by this bridge. Some people in the audience, they know that I bring this up, this slide, they have seen it. This bridge represents, on one hand, physics, which deals with the laws of the universe. These are the laws on which everything else depends. Biology are the rules of life, not the laws. Physics answers the question, or tries to answer the question, why? Biology, how? And chemistry has a fantastically important mission. How can you go from the why to the how? It's a bridge expressing general physical laws in a living organism on a small planet in an immense universe. That is what chemistry has to do. Of course, we are all scientists first, but if we want to define what we can contribute, I think this is really the, let's say, the conceptual, the important contribution. Of course, we can make materials, we can make polymers, we can make drugs and so on, but this is really how can we go from these general laws to the expression of these laws. It is the answer to the question, and this is something which one can discuss. It gets philosophical, self-organization. In other words, our universe has, the laws of our universe are such that it will self-organize. It's not an accident. It is a cosmic imperative. I mention also Christian de Duve, who got the Nobel Prize for Biology. He had published a book that life is a cosmic imperative. I want to make it even broader. The appearance of complexity is a cosmic imperative in our universe. Now, people were thinking about these problems a long time ago. And let me just cite two Greek philosophers, 2,500 years ago. There was Empedocles. He said that the universe was built on 4 elements: fire, air, water, and earth. And the combination made properties dry, hot, humid, and cold. Okay, so it was a start. But at the same time, there was another person of the same time, more or less, who had a much deeper inside was Democritus. He said that matter is particulate, and there are particles that you cannot make them smaller. In Greek, that's atomos. You cannot make it smaller. You cannot break them. Okay, we now know that there are electrons, protons, and all that kind of things. But that was a big insight. In fact, sorry, let's get a bit longer. Democritus was said, and his followers, there are no writings of Democritus, that he had the idea in the following way. When you put water and alcohol on top of each other, in the morning, it's only one phase. So he said, come on, this cannot be continuous. It must be particles that can mix. And this is said to be the way in which he was thinking, and I think that was quite deep, very deep. Now, many, many years later, particles and elements, what they were called elements, had accumulated, and there was a sort of a chaotic, a zoo, until some people tried to put some order. There was also a German, Lothar Meyer, but the one who had the best insight and the courage to go further was Dmitri Mendeleev, who in 1869 published a paper at that time. There was a lot of German in chemistry, in the German Chemical Society, die Zeitschrift für Chemie, über die Beziehungen der Eigenschaften zu den Atomgewichten der Elemente and the relationship between the properties of the atomic weight of the elements. Here is the first way this periodic table looked, and they are organized in columns rather than in periods, like when we now the representation we have now. And he had the courage to say, what we didn't find yet, we will find it. There are question marks, and they were found. Nowadays, this is what it looks like. This is a table. That's the most important table in our universe. Why? Because from 1 to 92 hydrogen to uranium, you see the elements, the other ones are artificial ones. You see what our universe is made of. And this is something very disappointing for me, because beyond 92, okay, even if you may admit that there's neptunium, plutonium, and so on, sure, why not? But there are still elements. And there's nothing between hydrogen and helium. There's nothing between titanium and vanadium. Just because it's arithmetics. 1 proton, 1 electron, 2 protons, 2 electrons. Of course, sometimes there are some neutrons coming in. But it's just counting. And it's very disappointing, because it means we are limited. For a scientist, you have these things and you cannot have others. Your Lego set is finished. Of course, we can use it all, making infinite number of objects, because you can connect many of them, fewer and different ones, and so on. But it is something which, it bothers me, I must say, to say that on our planet, in our universe, that's the way it is. And there's nothing between these bricks. You can say, okay, why not? Because I think we know now the structure of matter. We know how it builds up. What is even very astonishing is that we have discovered that. That is why I say just fantastic pictures in Rome everywhere. But that is the picture which is the most important for us. Nothing against the others, because they're beautiful, they're art. But that is the more profound one. Unfortunately, there's no other. That's the periodic table of the elements, as you know, and that's the playground of chemistry. We are children, we have a Lego set of 92 pieces, and now we play with it. Primo Levi chose some of them in his famous book on the periodic system. In fact, it's not the table. His book, the first edition, printing, was a system. And here are the ones which are in his book. So for those who want to write on the periodic system, there's still stuff to do. There's some work to do. You have many chapters left over. And okay, there's some Italian below, which I picked up from the internet, of course. Now, milestones in molecular chemistry. We have to build up molecules. Molecular chemistry is the art and science of making molecules from atoms. We can now just cite two milestones. One is Friedrich Wöhler. He was the first one to, it's admitted like that, okay. Man can sort of say maybe to other people, but Wöhler made urea from ammonium cyanate, and that was a chemical transformation, and he was very conscious of what he had done, even if it was very simple, because he wrote to, I don't remember to whom, just right now, and he said, I was able to make urea without the help of any organism, being dog or human. Interesting way also to write. Then centuries later, 2 centuries later, maybe, we had this synthesis of vitamin B12, a very complicated molecule where the common efforts were necessary for 2 groups, Robert Burns Woodward at Harvard and Albert Eschenmoser in Switzerland at the ETH. I worked with Woodward at that time for 63, 64. And this was considered as a huge achievement in molecular chemistry. Of course, now people have made more complicated molecules than that, but it's sort of the emblematic, the way in which molecular chemistry evolved to high complexity. Now, are molecules the end of the game? No. When you look at biology, here I represent a cancer cell and 2 killer cells. The killer cells will detect the cancer cell and destroy it. They shouldn't make a mistake. So there is something which tells them, the killer cells, that the other one is a cancer cell. The same is when you have viruses, like the HIV virus. When it hits a white blood cell, it can penetrate. And we have another example, COVID-19. Huh? How do they know that the killer cells have found a cancer cell, that the virus has now reached the target? There must be something between them which tells them a contact between the objects which make up these bodies, a contact between the molecules, and this is, of course, then the level which is supramolecular. Not that supramolecular chemistry is not a discovery, it's just a recognition that it exists, because it has always existed, of course. From the moment there was more than one molecule, supramolecular chemistry was there. In fact, I had just an interview, and usually when journalists ask me, can you explain to us what supramolecular chemistry is? So I start by saying, like there are molecules, there are entities, they react together. But the easy way to explain that, I'm sorry if I repeat it, but a water molecule isolated in the gas phase has no boiling point, no melting point, no viscosity, no any other property, dipole moment, and so on. A glass of water can freeze, can boil, has all these other properties. What is it? It's still water, but they are together, they interact, they bring up new properties. It's very simple. It's just, when you see a bunch of trees, usually you begin by collecting the trees. And at some stage you say, oh, there is a forest there. That's all, recognizing that there is a forest. So for molecular chemistry, we come to supramolecular chemistry. The first time I used that word was in 1978, but it could have been any time. And this is then mastering the interactions between molecules, and then it has to do with how molecules recognize one another, how a killer cell recognizes a cancer cell, and then also reactivity, how they react and how they carry each other. They can carry through membranes. Molecular recognition is the basis, and it is based on interactions. Think at molecules have an interaction, and also on information. That is something which for modern students who think about information all the time, who have all these nice little objects in their pocket, which are information carrying objects and information storage. You have interactions, information, which means that you have a sort of a fitting together, which Emil Fischer, again, a German chemist, but he got his PhD in Strasbourg. At that time, we were German, you know. That was one of the good things of these wars. We changed from one border to the other one. And the joke is that the Alsatians were always on the winning side. Because when the Germans won, we were German. When the French won, we were French. Okay, but it's not uncomfortable. It's a bit shaky, but all right. So he said in 1894 that for an action of an enzyme acting on substrate, they have to fit together like Schloss und Schlüssel, like a lock and the key. This is also something very easy to explain to journalists when they want to interview you. Now, this recognition is important, and of course, the most famous and for us the most important process is the storage of information in our DNA, in this strand of groups linked together in a long, long, long string. And here again, I said earlier that 92, that's not sufficient. We should look out. Here there are 4 letters. And with 4 letters, you write the genome of all living organisms. And these letters are trivial. They're not B12. They're much simpler. Adenine, guanine, thymine, cytosine. And they wrap around like in a double helix because they interact. So 4 letters are enough to write the genome of all human beings. On other planets, there can be other letters. And some chemists have started and trying to introduce other letters. But nevertheless, even if they succeed, we know that it's enough to make all of us and to read the information also by interaction. So chemistry is not just a science of a structure and transformation, how you make it and how you transform it, of living and non-living matter. Of course, before there was life, there was an evolution which was there because you cannot just jump from an atom to a living organism. And it's also an information science. The science, you can call that, you can have other formulations if you want, but the science of informed matter. Matter has information, and this information is what makes us. And it's written very simply. It's usually, come on, 4 letters. It's a joke that you can make all the human beings with 4 letters. But that's what it is. And the animals and the plants and so on. So the storage is at the level of the molecule, and the processing is at the level of interaction between these letters. They pair up. It's very simple also, just pairing. Now, of course, the question often asked, what is all that for? What is it good for? Of course, basic research, we want to have more knowledge. Applied research, we want to apply it. And in life sciences, there's something which I learned only recently. The first compound we made in the work on supramolecular chemistry was a cage, to put something in the cage. And it happens, this was a paper in the 1960s, that when you take potassium fluoride, that's for the chemists now, I'm sorry, but I guess all of you are chemists more or less. And when potassium fluoride is alone, the fluoride and potassium, they interact very strongly. If you put now the potassium in a big cage, the fluoride has to go out. So it becomes very unhappy, very reactive. And so we had studied this with Bernard Dietrich at that time and Jean-Pierre Sauvage. I learned that in Jülich and in other places where they make the labeled molecules for positron emission tomography, they use the cryptates. I would never have guessed it when we started it. If you take potassium fluoride, you put the potassium in a cage, and then you can use it as a reagent. So that's a practical application. Another application is that a drug is a key for a biological lock. So you want to adapt the key, and a drug is that. With a drug, you want to influence, either inhibit or activate a biological molecule, a protein, an enzyme, or something. Then it happens also that somebody else, we had made some, with Vincenzo Balzani, he's a good friend, and we had studied the luminescence of europium sitting in a cavity. When it's outside in water, it gets deactivated by the water vibrations, so you don't see any fluorescence. But if you put it in a hole, in a cavity which protects it, you can make this as a label for medical diagnostics. And Gérard Matisse, who was a CNRS person from Nancy, he had also relationship with us. He made in a company, in a small company, SysBio, this apparatus which for medical diagnostics, which is now used in many hospitals. Gene transfer was another thing which we did, where we contributed something to helping a piece of gene to go through the membranes. That, of course, leads to genetically modified organisms, which is something which some people don't like, but I think we need it. We will use it. I'm sure we will use it. First of all, the easiest is for genetic diseases, because in genetic diseases, you can correct for the one which doesn't work. If you want to make new ones, then let's say it, you make diversity. Huh? You create diversity which doesn't exist yet. Which one you want to make, that's another question. But you can make genetically modified organisms which have other properties. Finally, biomaterials of supramolecular nature. This is also something when we developed supramolecular polymers, we did not know where it would lead. We just developed it. And then Bert Meyer in the Netherlands contributed to, we used 3 hydrogen bonds, he used 4 hydrogen bonds. At any rate, in 2013, supramolecular polymers were used for the surgical treatment of children who had a very severe congenital malformation of the heart. And here you see the first case. Dominika was operated on by Leo Bourquiria. Leo Bourquiria was, he still is, I suppose, at the Bakulev Center for Cardiac Pediatric Surgery in Moscow. Now, we don't go to Moscow anymore. It's a pity, it's terrible. Let's think about. I don't know what happened to him. I have good friends over there, and so what can you do? So beyond then supramolecular chemistry, you want to define rules which lead to self-organization, to make spontaneous but controlled by the molecular information objects which have new properties and which organize. And just to give an example of something which is really chemistry, not biology. Viruses are a bunch of molecules. They are not living. They are just a set of molecules like here, 2,130 bricks, protein units, and also a genome of the virus. If you mix them, they get together and you generate automatically the particle. It's really self-organization in the sense that it works by itself. By itself, you get this spontaneously. And of course, then one can think of many artificial things which can be done and has been done around the different laboratories. You can sort of say, program, if I want to use again the language of information, you can program your system. And it's really programming we know that when we have a carbon, when we have an oxygen, we have a nitrogen, the program is quite fixed. So just to give you some examples, it was possible to make artificial double helix or triple helix, which has nothing to do with DNA, which just fun playing, be able to do it. Just, chemists sometimes, they like to show that we can do it. Objects like that, where you have metal ions like silver, organized in a grid-like fashion by perpendicular molecules oriented in that way, circular architectures, and also nanocylinders, things like that. And so the possibility exists that we may go from directly from the device, from the component to the device, which means that fabrication is replaced by self-fabrication, which is, of course, the ultimate way. After all, the virus does it. The virus is self-fabricating. It makes itself, because the pieces are the correct ones. So, just to give one example of what we are doing now, I have talked up to now by doing chemistry by design, by inserting information and programming the system, which leads to what supermolecular chemistry has been doing in the last 60 years now. But there is another property to include, selection. Can the system select what it needs to build itself up? So if you have a vast diversity of bricks, of stones, can they automatically select what it needs? It can. The virus has done it too, so that's the example was already there. You need diversity, you need dynamics, you need the objects to be able to dissociate and reassociate, and this then leads to what we call the constitutional dynamic chemistry. That means a dynamic chemistry which resides in the constitution of the object. It's not something moving. It's not something changing conformation. It's something which breaks the object and reassembles it, and perhaps differently, because if the conditions change after breaking and before reassociating, then you have also an adaptation possible. The object will be different, will be adapting to the new conditions, and this is then adaptive chemistry, which is now what we mostly do. This adaptive chemistry can be applied for a search for biologically active substances, because if you have all this collection of bricks and you put in, for instance, an enzyme, the enzyme will be the lock which will select the key. In other words, it looks sort of ideal. The lock selects the keys to get in. It will self-assemble. Then you can also have dynamic nanostructures and dynamic materials and technologies. For instance, for materials, the fact that you can make polymers which disintegrate and reintegrate and in a different way. Now, I want just to insist on some features which you certainly know about chemistry, which is chemistry has a creative side. It's a creative science. These are pictures here. We call creation something for arts. But science is as creative as arts. And because chemistry can create novel expression of matter, more and more complex. So the book of chemistry has to be written, not only to be read. And the score of chemistry has to be composed, not only to be played. So chemistry has a creative power, and this creative power is also already, many people have suggested something like that, but we can cite Leonardo, who is another famous Italian, and you can read the Italian, so I don't have to read you the English translation, but it's very clear that he had a very profound feeling about what happens. Man begins using natural things, atoms, molecules, in harmony with his very nature, the laws of nature, the physical laws, the way you put together two carbon, oxygen, and so on. And then the end is very strong, a creare infiniti specie. to create an infinity of species. Very, very strong. And that means also that, of course, not just natural. Of course, when we have to investigate the world which is around us. When I started my PhD, I was doing natural product chemistry. Okay, I extracted birch tree, the bark of birch tree, and you have terpenes in there, and then you study the terpenes. But you can also make things. And most of what I told you does not exist in nature. So it's man-made, I should say human-made, because man these days forgets about women, but that is just a turn of the century. It's the same, we all know that man is, but human is not bad. Human-made is what one should say. In fact, I changed it on a slide, which I used this morning, I think in Sapienza. So let's go to mathematics, just to conclude, almost. David Hilbert, very famous mathematician, he's buried in Göttingen. He wanted to have 2 sentences on his tombstone. Wir müssen wissen, we must know. That's the beginning. Wir werden wissen, we will know. The beginning is that push it, you want to know. But then the conviction, I think the faith you have into we will know. Now, how far we will know? We have made enormous progress in very few years. After all, what is 2 centuries in regard of the thousands of years of evolution of life, and of course, not to speak about the non-life. And this is thanks to science. And so, not for you, but it's for you too. You are young enough in your spirit to participate, because science shapes the future of humanity. And now I want to broaden a little bit. This is our planet, and nothing in the universe. Nothing. There's nothing. You don't see it. You need an electronic microscope, and you have to look at it. And science has no borders. And science is valid everywhere. Now, this is difficult. Again, saying that the periodic table is limited and saying that everything in the periodic table is valid everywhere is something which hurts me, which bothers me, because it's like a dogma, but it's inescapable. That's the point. Science has no borders, also because what we find on Earth is valid everywhere. That's why you can find water on Jupiter, on Enceladus, one of the planets around Saturn, because they now think that there's water there, and everywhere. If you see a far-off signal, which has water signals, vibrations, there's water on that place. Here is dear Primo Levi, and that's his other book, which is very famous too. Thank you very much. I would just like to add something that with Peter Goelitz, as I said, we started these European journals, and I think it was a way of trying to bring together countries and into science, because after all, science is valid everywhere. And I cannot understand that nowadays we have to spend money on arms. How stupid is it?
Thank you very much, Professor Len. I'm sure I'm reporting the feeling of everyone in Heartful, thanking you for being the voice of chemistry as an exceptional science which has a lot to say about the progress of mankind in the direction of peace and ethical values. And this is why you're known everywhere by everyone, not only because remarkably you are a Nobel laureate, but also because you're an ambassador of those values in science and in full harmony with the spirit of the Primo Levi Award. Thank you very much. The tradition of the Primo Levi Award is that there is not a medal, but a gift, which symbolizes the message of Primo Levi and represents our gratitude to the awardee. And in this case, I'll open it for you.
Is it made by Leonardo?
It's made by Italian artists. See, I'm opening it for you because it's a little bit loud. Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
Now, I should open it.
You should open, but it's a delicate opening, so this is why I'm opening it.
So it looks like delicate.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Is that for an eternity?
That's in the spirit of Primo Levi legacy. It stands as a reminder that when time and memory are kept inseparable, they are like science, oriented toward building a better future. And this is in recognition of the commitment you embody through a lifetime of outstanding scientific achievements, always combined with moral responsibility and a tireless dedication to promoting the ethical message of science. Congratulations and thank you. And there is also a small... Okay, thank you. And with this, our ceremony comes to an end. But before, I would like to thank, first of all, Professor Jean-Marie Lehn, our laureate, all the colleagues of the German Chemical Society for coming here. And what I appreciate a lot is that young members of your societies are here. You are very welcome to build up in the joint spirit that is represented by the Primo Levi Award, together with the young representatives of the Italian Chemical Societies, who are also represented by their coordinator, Marco Mendolicchio. I would also thank the president of Federazione dell'Ordine Nazionale dei Chimici e dei Fisici, Dr. Nausicaa Orlandi, and his vice president, Professor Martino Di Serio, for being with us today, the representative of UCHEMS, all the members of the Italian Chemical Society, and all of you for celebrating with us today this very important moment. Thank you very much.
I can also add that, in fact, Rod Hoffman was my first American friend. He was in the same department when I was with Woodward at Harvard. He was just 2 doors away. And Vincenzo Balzani is a very good friend too, of course. And who is the third one?
It's Henninghoff.
Oh, Henninghoff, yeah. I would have proposed also Helmut Ringstorff, but he died. Because he was very, very also sort of wanted to bring people together, European and so on. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.